Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca.
Hello, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. It truly is an honor to host Carys Cragg in this episode. Carys's first book, titled Dead Reckoning: How I Came to Meet the Man Who Murdered My Father, tells the story of her correspondence and meeting with the incarcerated man who murdered her father when she was 11 years old. It was a Globe and Mail Best 100 book of 2017, finalist for the 2018 Hubert Evans BC Book Prize, and finalist for the 2018 Governor General's Literary Award. Carys is faculty and coordinator in the Child and Youth Care Degree Program at Douglas College and is currently completing her Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership. I'm excited to dive into this conversation. So, Carys Cragg, I am so honored to have you as a guest on a Resilience Project with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. You've written a book that is super meaningful, and we're going to unpack that a little bit. But I really want to draw on the inspiration behind your book, which is your dad. When I read your book, it was just an amazing story that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But also What stands out for me is what a meaningful person your dad had been in your life. Can you tell us what happened on that very, very unfortunate day where something horrible happened in your family and how old you were at the time?
For sure. And thanks for starting in this place in terms of my dad. I wrote a book and we'll get to those details. But really the book, even though it's sitting on a true crime shelf in chapters, it really, I believe, is like a love letter to my dad. And because he's such a giant force in my life when he was alive and as he's died.
Yes.
And to this day, and I do hope that we'll talk about today too and how he shows up in my life.
I'd love that.
As I feel like he is such a source of resilience for me. So,
wow.
But yeah. And so I think, I'm 40 this year. I'm very excited about being 40. I have no idea why.
Love it.
And so I say that because I'm forgetting how many years since Dad died. And I say that also because I used to know exactly how many years. And since the past couple of years, somehow I've been released from that. And I find it really freeing. So when I was 11 years old, I lived in Calgary. So I'm from Vancouver. I was born in Vancouver, spent the first 6 years of my life in Vancouver. And then we moved to Calgary because my dad was a family physician in Vancouver and decided he was around 40 and he decided he wanted to go back to school to become an orthopedic surgeon. So we moved to Calgary for him to go do that. And we were living there, leading a very nice life, sort of near the university. And I don't know Vancouver as a child. I know Calgary as a child, and I loved Calgary. You know, it's the place where it's so cold in the winters, but not Vancouver cold, a different kind of cold. And you all get into your winter clothes and you all like gather with all the kids and you all walk in the snow. So that I have those kind of idealistic memories of Calgary. But in his last year of studies in orthopedic surgery, in the middle of September, we all went to bed like normal. And in the middle of the night, I woke up to screaming. I opened my door where I saw a whole bunch of blood on the walls and the stairwell. And I heard my mom screaming, "Call 911." And I was the eldest of the siblings. I was 11. And I have 3 other siblings. And while they were all downstairs with my dad, who was lying on the front porch bleeding, as neighbors came to rush over because they heard the commotion and conflict, and then eventually the ambulance coming. I was on the phone with the ambulance, and at that point I didn't really understand what was happening. Like I didn't know why was there a whole bunch of blood, like what was going on with my dad. And after the ambulance came and our neighbors took us next door to wait, and my mom went to the hospital with my dad. My dad was in the emergency room with all of his colleagues who were trying to save him, but he died. And then I learned that morning that a young man who was about 21 years old had been high on drugs, running around the neighborhood and looking for cars to steal out of garages. This is what he was shown to be doing for a number of months. And he apparently was in my garage and saw the window open in our house, came into the house and was looking around for things. And as my dad woke up to the noise and who went downstairs to the kitchen area, this man had taken a knife from my kitchen and stabbed my father a number of times. And then as my dad laid there bleeding, he ran away and was caught about a day later and was in prison for quite some time after that. It was life-changing and horrific.
I can't imagine being 11 and just seeing your dad there in a state of emergency, needing help. But the question marks that must have been going through your head, like what just happened? You don't see the perpetrator. You don't see anybody else other than your dad in that state. And everybody goes through the motions, but to not learn till the next day, like what actually happened here? Because you didn't witness this man coming into your home. You didn't see it. You just heard the commotion. I can't imagine what that would have been like at 11 to try to piece that together. I can only imagine the story you were trying to figure out.
Yeah, and even just those details, I remember quite vividly next door in the hours between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. when my mom came back to let us know that your dad has died. That I remember sitting in the bathroom wondering, like, will he survive? I remember asking with my sisters and brother, will he survive? He's such a strong man. Like, he's such a physically strong and such a big presence in our lives. And your 11-year-old brain can't quite figure out, like, what is going on. And so then the rest of the day we kind of spent with close friends in the neighborhood. I remember watching TV and I remember the news kind of manhunt for this person. Yeah.
And did you know the manhunt was for the guy that had injured your dad?
Oh, yes, for sure. But as soon as my mom came back from the hospital, and people were visiting and there was just so much discussion. And then there was news reporters and then there was a crime scene tape and all those details. So you're trying to just sit there, put everything together. And
I just can't imagine. When I think about that being such a critical part of your development and such a traumatic loss. And what I do know is that when there is a traumatic loss, it can be very, very difficult to understand it, unpack it. It's not like any other grief. It's very unique in its own right. Mm-hmm. So when I think about the next, say, months, years to come, I took note in your book that you said you went and saw a counselor.
Oh, yes.
And the counselor was trying to tell you exactly what was going to happen for you.
I forget how soon after, but within the year, because we stayed in Calgary until the end of the school year. And then we moved back home. Really, it was where my mom's family, who we're really close with. When you think of an 11-year-old or more younger siblings, you're not that much younger than me. I think of all of those losses at the same time, that they're all a part of this loss, because you take out a member of a family and it changes everything. And then we moved back to Vancouver, and that was a switch between grade 6 and 7. So coming to a new high school, everyone has friends, everyone has a world.
Yes.
All of that is mixed together for me at that juncture in time. And so when I think about the different interventions, but we all went together. I'm sure it was like recommended to her, like we all go together. And so I remember going together and then separately. And I don't remember why separately, but I do remember that the counselor told me that, one day you are going to be very mad at your father for leaving you. And so 15, 20 years later, I realized she was thinking of the stages of death and dying, transferred over to grief and grieving, and telling me that there's stages that you walk through. And I remember different influences like that, but also other counselors who were the exact opposite, who were just like, what are you feeling? What do you need? What are you doing? So I have these collected experiences of, okay, that's how I want to be in the world. I don't want to be like this. I want to be like this. Yeah. So that was hard because, of course, as a kid, you don't know why you're being sent to a counselor. You think you've done something bad or wrong, not overtly bad, but just like you're not healing in the right way. What an absurd concept that we think there is in the world. And so it's interesting. I told my mom at the time that I don't want to go do that again, even though I'm a great fan of counselors and have seen many in my life, including after that or soon after that. But that was very distinct to me. And I no longer see that experience as traumatic. I used to see it as very traumatic. And I now see it as kind of a way that I defined how I wanted to be in the world and how I wanted to choose my profession and how I wanted to govern that profession.
I love that. Well, when you say that, I think about resilience, and that's what it is. You sometimes learn by the things that didn't work, and it informs us on how we want to be in the world. Or like you said, some of those experiences also informed you on what you want to do when you're a grown up along the way.
Totally. Yeah.
And so I mentioned the counseling because I think about how long it can take to really process something like that. So you're 40 now, and I don't want to jump ahead too far yet because I think there's some really critical pieces in the middle here. But I mentioned that as maybe one tool that you found helpful in your story of resilience when you found those counselors that were a really good fit for you, that really spoke the language that you needed to hear, that maybe that was an important piece for you in some of your healing along the way.
Absolutely. I can think of a guidance counselor in our middle school in Vancouver, and how one day she must have saw me writing, which is obviously a huge source of resilience in my life. And she gave me a journal. She's like, here you go. I thought, wow, like my reflections are special enough to be in a journal.
Yes.
Wow, that's so honoring. And I think I saw like a counselor outside of the school who I think I had to argue to my mom, like, I need to go see a counselor. Like I was one of those kids. Anyways.
I love it.
And so good on her. She's like, hey. So I did. And I remember that counselor, she said, early on in our chats, she got me to do like the Myers-Briggs personality test, and did that, like a good test taker I was like, okay. And then she kind of summarized some of these dispositions or personality traits and things and preferences. And I felt that was so honoring, like, wow, okay. So it's okay that I'm strong-willed, and it's okay that I'm opinionated, and it's okay that I think things are wrong. And that was so honoring of who I was. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yeah, and you just never know what's going to make the difference in somebody's life, and how a simple gesture like that could resonate with you in that way. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you talk about yourself as strong-willed, and all through your book, I could just see this young lady who just knew exactly what she wanted and needed to really advocate for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's not unusual in a family system. I wonder if you could speak to how you found your voice there in your family as well, and really distinguishing yourself in your journey of healing.
Yes. It's so funny because as I age, I feel like I'm more like my family. But at the time, I was really the odd one out in terms of hobbies, disposition, needs. And it mostly came into conflict when I was trying to express myself in some kind of way or a particular need, like just to have affection in my family, feel loved or feel like I had space to just talk, or just even acknowledge that this massive loss and trauma and crime happened, and that is not okay, and that we could figure this out together. It was very isolated family. Everyone was just surviving, like no fault of anyone's.
Sure.
Everyone was just kind of forced into survival mode. And so there was minimal connection. I mean, we were relatively, we were just fine. We had a home, we had food, we had each other, but lots of conflict and lots of just kind of emotional neglect because no one had the capacity. And so until much later on, so in that, when you're someone in that system that needs to talk, wants more affection, wants to process, that is so difficult. So I'm not surprised that I'm not getting this need met in this way here. So I'm going to go and figure it out some other way. For me, the first way that that started to express itself, I would say, is writing, because I would constantly write, like in a journal. Yeah. And so that was just everything for me. And through that, oh, okay, well, I feel better. So I'm going to keep doing this.
It became intuitive that you just discovered that along the
Absolutely.
way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we then carry that to the place where, as an adult, you decided you wanted to find out, maybe, or pursue, first of all, it was a bit of a journey because you became interested in maybe meeting the man who murdered your dad.
Yes. So kind of like to preface this with, I felt like every new developmental stage, like teenage, early adult, and now mom, I feel like I process this loss in a different way and process the trauma in a different way. And by that, I don't mean I'm re-traumatized or that I'm starting at square one, but rather just like I make sense of it in new ways at every stage. And I have no doubt that I'll continue to do that until I die. And so when I was kind of like pursuing ways to express myself or care for myself or tend to things that were missing, I'm not entirely surprised now looking back that I eventually came to a place where I was like, okay, well, now I'm ready for this part. But it didn't happen in like I'm going to do that in 5 years.
Yes.
So I was 29, I think, and I was working as a youth counselor, outreach counselor. And so I was kind of in this nice place living my life. And I was in this job, and this friend, Shannon, who I share in the book, she and I met. We shared this same job. And so like all new friends, we go from coffee and wanting to get to know each other better as people, because she's just super cool. And so we were sitting in a coffee shop, and she's a very curious person. And like all new friends in my life forever, I have to eventually tell them, oh, this is how my dad died. Because I guess the way that I narrate it or not narrate it, people think he must have died really suddenly. Because I've asked people after, like, oh, well, how did you think my dad died? And they think heart attack or something very sudden, because the way that I just narrate it without telling them. Eventually, I guess all friends eventually feel comfortable to ask. And so I told her very similar story to what I just told you. And at that point in time, she asked about the offender. And so I told her that he's been in prison since. A year later in his trial, he was sentenced to 25 years to life. At that time, he had been in prison for 20 years. I knew some information because I had registered as a victim with Government of Canada or Correction Services. So I knew some things. So she asked a little bit about that. And then she said, do you want to know more? When she said that in this super non-judgmental way, it was just curious. It was just like, oh, do you want to know more? And so I'll take one tangent, because whenever I've shared that my dad was murdered, most people, again, no fault of their own, because how could they ever respond in any other way? Like, it's such a shock that most people end the conversation very quickly, or just are totally shocked and just kind of, I guess, are processing it in some kind of way that I don't recognize on their side. But Shannon, that was not at all. Like, it was totally different. She was like, do you want to know more? And at that moment in time, everything intersected for me. It was just like, there was a flurry of activity the 24 hours after that, exploring like all options. I was like, yes, I do want to know more. I don't know what, and I don't know how, but I have a few things that could help me lead me through that question. And so that's what I did. I connected with Correction Services, Victim Services, and this woman I had seen present to a group, and her husband was murdered. And I emailed her, and all of those tangents got back to me within a day and said, yes, here's how. And so that's what I then pursued.
I wonder if there was a little bit of you that went, oh, okay, now it's getting real.
Oh, yes. It was like, okay. And it was just so much action. And most of it in my head is like I was building up capacity or curiosity or wellness in some areas where I felt like, whoa, now's the time. And a little bit of safety because I knew he was in prison. I knew this was a controlled thing. I know many people who have experienced crime and specifically murder do not have that same structure to work within. Like murder is very messy, crime is very messy and unsafe. And so that was another piece that I think that made me okay going into the, okay, what have I just opened?
Yeah, I can only imagine. I love that in your book, you also mention, you made a little list for yourself. Okay, why do I want to meet this person?
Yes.
And when I read through that list, it made me think about your healing.
Yes.
To take care of your younger self was one of them. To tell him your story, because often, you might get a little bit of background on him, but also to tell him the impact this has had on you. And that's pretty powerful. That was a pretty cool list that you made, that over time, you just gave yourself the space to write and figure out, what is this going to mean to me?
Yes. And that weekend or within like 2 weeks that I wrote that, because after I was doing all that, administrative stuff, I then literally like go out onto the patio with like a glass of wine and my computer. And I was like, why on earth do I want to do this? Slow down. What is this for? I was asking that. And because I'm a list person, it came out literally as a list. And so, and some more kind of basic information gathering things, in addition to the more depth-filled questions, like you said. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like it helps you get in touch with Carys and that deep down inside piece that helps you go, okay, what is this really about? Like you seems like someone who's very introspective and really wants to understand it for yourself.
Yes, and to a fault. Like I'm absolutely certain all of our strengths are also our challenges. So, but yes, so introspective probably to a fault. Like I have to rein it in. At least writing has been the way that I access an interior type of voice that tells me what I need. And it's never, ever, ever let me down. And so I do believe, looking back on my early writing, like more of the journaling writing, really was just a way to access that when no structure or process or people are doing that in your life outside. So I went in and wrote. And I've always done that. And in fact, now when I do, I feel like, I feel so much better. And so like, I need to make room for that. But at the time, the whole time, writing became a form to communicate. I found that writing accessed what I needed to know or where I needed to go, so that I wasn't super influenced by all the people who were saying like, don't do that, or you should do this, or why would you do that? And it's like, no, shh. Like I need to go inside and ask myself what I'm doing. And that has always helped.
I'm so pleased you have that ability to do that. So can we jump to then where you started to correspond with the offender?
Yeah. I eventually was set up, or quite soon after that inquiry, set up with restorative justice practitioners in Langley at the Fraser Valley. Anyways, and they're amazing. And they went over some options as to like how I could be in contact with him. And there were quite a few different options, and they were open to different ones. And when they said, and like you could write to him and not ask for a letter back, or you could invite a conversation. And I was like, that I want to do that. And so we started to write, and collectively we wrote like 15 letters over 2 years. And they're so interesting to look back on in terms of how the conversation flowed and what went. But it really just started with a letter saying, I'm the eldest daughter of the man you're responsible for killing, and I want to engage in some kind of conversation. Would you be willing to do that? And let's go from there. And that's what started.
That's how it started. Well, and I don't want to be a spoiler alert, because I'm really hoping people will read your book, because there's so much value in hearing the process that took and your reflections along the way, and what you were taking and really questioning things. Like you don't just take things at face value, you dig deep and you really listen between the lines. And I hope that readers will dive deeper into the book for sure. So it took 2 years of writing letters.
Yeah.
And how did you know you were ready to meet him?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because within a couple of letters, within a couple of months, the restorative justice workers were kind of like, we're ready to send you if you want to go. Like, and I was like, no, I'm not ready yet. Like, and I don't know why. Like, it was kind of nice to have their kind of like implicit kind of permission. Not that that's what they're there for. They're not to give permission. They're just rather just to kind of walk alongside you. And they really occupy a super cool space in that regard. Speaking of helpers, oh my gosh, they're just critical to my journey and empowerment. I think I just wanted to establish something between me and him in the letters, and to share who I was and learn who he was and what our intentions were. And we shared more and more and more each time we wrote. And there was a certain point where I was like, okay, well, now I'm ready to meet you. And so I asked, like, in a letter, like, can we meet, and can we meet on this particular day? Would that be okay? And then we met. Then we wrote after. And I also knew after that when I wanted to end too, because that was a really big part of the journey too, is like, when do you want to end?
Yeah. So, yeah, would you mind sharing what it was like to meet him for the first time, and what was important in maybe your healing in that experience?
Yeah. So it kind of connects to the first letter that I received from him. The overwhelming feeling I had at the time was, oh, you're a person. And because before then, he was very much positioned in my family to be very much like a ghost. Best kind of metaphor analogy I can give, especially in contrast to like a monster. Like, a lot of people position him as a monster or expect me to experience him like that himself.
Yes.
To be honest, like, we never spoke about him as a family. So it was just kind of a wondering. Like, I know there's this person in prison for entirely altering my life, but I don't know anything about him. And so I shared that because when I first met him, he just became more of a person. He became like a body. I could hear the tone of his voice. I could see the positioning of his body. I could see the strength that he projects and the weakness that he held inside. You could see all of it and you could hear it. And so he just became more of that. And it became every kind of moment, including that one, kind of just populated it or made it real, such that eventually, okay, now I'm going to stop that. And I'm going to stop imagining you. I'm going to stop thinking about you. I'm going to stop asking my questions, because I've asked them, but I've never really thought about him since, other than when someone asks me. Like, I do feel like that close interaction of writing and then physically meeting helped me then move forward or let go or move past, or, those types of metaphors we try and grapple with loss.
Well, it's like facing the bad guy. It's facing, I was thinking of him as the bad guy, but like a ghost or a monster, when you face the thing that scares you the most, it often can take the power out of it. Now, it could have gone many different ways. Now, I can't remember, how many conversations did you have in person?
So in person, it was just one day. Oh. So it was from 9:00 in the morning until about 12 or maybe 11:30. And then we went for lunch, and then we came back, I'm guessing like 1:30 to 4. So it was all day, but that's the only time in person. Now, I've been in the same room as him after that for parole hearings, but that's obviously a totally different way of being in the room together.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate hearing how maybe you've even been surprised by the absence of thinking about him, or the absence of the power he's had in your life. And sometimes that's how healing goes, isn't it? Where it's suddenly just no longer there in the same powerful way it was.
Yes. And to be able to have the privilege of writing those questions, calling them out on information, questioning, highlighting inconsistencies, then questioning more and sharing more on my terms. Obviously, there's a structure there that we were following, letter writing or meeting in that kind of constrained environment. But within that structure, I had all the power. And of course, talking to most victims, for lack of a better word, survivors of crime, that disempowerment that happens, I would say any crime, that you then struggle to get back, that whole journey, I took it back, and nothing else for me. I'm not saying this is for other people. I got all of that power back. And so I'll share this because this was the kind of the most meaningful point in the journey, I'd say, of all of it. Afterwards, so like around 4:30, we hopped back in the car and we were heading from Drumheller back to Calgary Airport, the gorgeous rolling hills of Drumheller and Calgary and, foothills, right? And the kind of muted colors, the sun setting. I'm looking out the window and I have this overwhelming feeling, and it was just stunning scenery. But I just realized, oh my God, I've just met my father's murderer. Like, I can do anything. I can do anything. And it was like this ultimate feeling of power. Sure, I've experienced anxieties and sadnesses after, but all of that loss and that the power that's taken away from you and this total out of controlness you feel at 11 sitting in a bathroom, it just reappeared. And I just never felt that unease again.
That's an amazing description, Carys. I really appreciate your sharing that with us, because I can just see in your face as you tell me, and I wish the listeners could see your face when you talk about that moment. And that sometimes those little wins where we realize that we are no longer feeling like that victim. Yeah. And I just hope that listeners out there hearing this might pull something from that, where they're really avoiding that very hard thing or challenging themselves to know when the right time is to face something really hard, and the enlightenment that can come afterwards from that experience, like you just described. And it can be scary and it can be intimidating, but like you did, maybe there's a safe way to walk through that. Maybe there's a safe way to design it so you have some control over the pacing. And I think that's a beautiful example.
Thank you. And people often share with me their equivalent journey where they then get to that place of, I like how you use the word enlightenment, or just that freedom, that something. And it's just like this weight is lifted off you that you had no idea you were carrying.
Yeah. And so on that note, because I really want to wrap this up in a beautiful message about your dad. And I just think about, you can hear it in your book, just how much you loved and admired your dad.
Yeah.
And I could hear the connection you had with your dad, and whether it was through sailing as a family. And I love the sailing theme through it in each of the chapters. I thought that was really cool how you tied that in. I can definitely hear the honoring of your dad in so much of this book.
Thank you. Well, and really sometimes look back and I think I have a very childlike understanding of my dad, and a lot of my own journey has been to like make him a person too, like make him a full person, make him a person, not just this perfect, high achieving, gregarious, amazing, charismatic dad, but also like a real person with faults and missteps and all these things. And I think as I engaged in this journey with the offender, I got to know my dad better. And I got to know myself better. I came back and all my friends were like, how did it go? How'd it go? And eventually that got a bit overwhelming. But one of my friends who I mentioned earlier, Shannon, who I mentioned in the book, asked me to kind of share what I said. And at the end of the day, I think my dad was a cool guy. And I think he would say, just go find something that you want to do in your life and go do it really well and go make people happy and go do all those things. And I said something to Shannon about that. And she said back to me, and Carys, that's what you do. You're just like your dad. And for me, I couldn't have accessed my dad in that way without him doing this. I didn't know I could know my dad in a whole new way. And I didn't know I could learn who he was and learn who I am through this. And so I feel more connected with him rather than not connected with him, which is actually what some people thought I was doing, was kind of violating the spirit of my dad by visiting this man. And I thought I was actually honoring my dad. And so I'm so happy I got to do that. Yeah.
I am so glad too. And it was a question that came to mind even as we're talking today, because I can hear it two purposes. It was not only in your healing to write this book, perhaps, but also in honoring your dad. And it's a way of keeping his memory alive and honoring the trauma that you went through, what he would have gone through in that moment, the way he was trying to protect his family, and all the healing that's been happening all these years. And I just wanted to also pull that out. I wanted to make sure I just circled back for those that are going through healing after a trauma. I just want to give people hope that, yes, you're right. You're going to be tackling different pieces of it, but you're not ever at ground zero again. And it can feel like you're uncovering another piece of it, but to not be afraid to do that work and to find the help that you need, a way of processing it. Like for you, Carys, whether it's counseling or writing. I just wanted to circle back. There was something you said earlier that made me think about really pulling that out to help people understand that it's okay, that it's a bigger picture, because complex trauma is like that. It's not just a one-shot deal in healing.
Absolutely. And I guess lastly, I think that however we access that voice, for me, it happens to be writing. I know some people, it happens to be by like physical movement in nature. For others, it's through dialogue. Like there's just so many ways we access ourselves and our like kind of inherent knowledge about ourselves and what we need. And for me, I found like at every juncture in time, I'm just trying to listen to what do I need and then following through with that and making sure I prioritize that. And no matter what other people say. And so the only thing that's ever I've been able to trust, because as soon as I feel like I veer off of that and do what someone says I should do or feel what I should feel, it hasn't been what I need. And so I truly believe that everyone at their core going through anything traumatic knows what they need and how honoring it is to get to that piece of yourself and honor that self. Because I feel like in that way, I was caring for my younger self.
Yeah. Carys, thank you so much for taking the time to share such a vulnerable story. And it's an important story. And so I appreciate that you would be willing to not only share your book with many, but also that you would be here with us as a guest today to talk about your journey through resilience. And I know it's a lifelong journey, but I really love that we could also honor your dad in this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your lovely questions.
My pleasure. Despite the complexities and great loss identified in this conversation, I can't think of a better framework than to consider this story a love letter to Carys's father. There are just so many key points to her journey and what she has discovered through her loss, the complexity of trauma, and the benefit of understanding healing through a multi-stage process. I would like to highlight that resilience has evolved over various stages in Carys's life. The grief process is not a one-size-fits-all. Whether it was the guidance counselor giving Carys the journal, or perhaps stumbling on this as a means of reflection, it is apparent how valuable writing has become in Carys's journey through complex trauma and loss. Recognizing the very unique nature of Carys's story, I think it is valuable to highlight the importance for her in corresponding with the offender and eventually having an opportunity to meet him. I can only imagine the courage it would have taken to initiate this process, but it also allowed Carys the opportunity to eventually find a sense of closure. At a time when many victims feel disempowered, she was able to take back some control in setting the pace of their correspondence, the questions she could ask, and the amount that she could share. Once she had faced this ghost in her life, she realized she could do anything. Perhaps, as Carys suggests, one of the greatest gifts she has experienced on this journey is to learn more about her father, to feel closer to him even after his death, and in turn also learn about herself. Finally, I'm not sure how many of you know this, but the term dead reckoning refers to the experience of figuring out where you are and where you are going based on where you have been. I wonder how many of you might even apply this to where you are today. How might you learn from where you have been? Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. My hope is to feature an episode periodically on your letters of resilience. I'm very interested in hearing your story of how you have tackled hard things and what worked for you. With your permission, I hope to share some of these stories along the way with our listeners. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to learn more about our amazing guests. Your presence here is important because together we are cultivating a village of resilient individuals. You are creating a space for their stories to be shared and a sacred space for learning to occur. I also have a favor. I would love for you to go to your preferred podcast platform, rate and review the podcast so that we will know how we're doing. I also would like to express my gratitude to the amazing team of volunteers that have jumped on board to support this project. You will find each of those beautiful people on my website on the team page. As you go about this week, I invite you to think about one way that you can continue to grow your resilient muscle. What is one thing you can start with today? See you next week.
Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca